Oppenheimer Healthcare Conference, the virtual Oppenheimer Healthcare Conference. I'm Hartaj Singh. I'm one of the biotech analysts over here, and I have the pleasure to introduce Cyclo Therapeutics, a company that we're slowly but surely getting to know over the last year. We've got the CEO, Scott Fine, and also Lisa Gems. Lisa, I apologize if I'm massacring your last name, but we have her also to do the presentation with Scott, and they will leave us some time for Q&A. So Scott and Lisa, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Hartaj, and thank you, OPCO, for hosting us today. Please look at our forward-looking statements, everyone. Very quickly, because I do want to dive in to allow Lisa enough time to speak about the science and medicine, because frankly, we all know that's what drives our value and drives our company. But very quickly, we're a platform technology using a cyclodextrin technology. We are currently going after 2 clinical assets. We have a late phase clinical asset with a phase 3 enrolling and dosing trial right now for Niemann-Pick type C, an ultra rare disease that affects the processing of cholesterol in the system. We also have stood up and will be standing up a phase 2 clinical program for Alzheimer's. We will be opening up that trial this year, and we anticipate enrolling patients in the trial this year. Under our Niemann-Pick type C program, we do have orphan drug designation in both US and in Europe, and we have the EMA did accept our pediatric investigational plan, which gave us an additional 2 years of exclusivity on our Niemann-Pick type C program under the EMA. I want to be very clear, we are depending upon our ODD designation in Europe and US for market exclusivity under those periods, but we do have extensive trade secrets. Under our Alzheimer's program, we have been working extensively on a patent program, and we do have a patent pending globally on the utilization of our compound for the treatment of Alzheimer's at this point in time. We now do want to really stress the utilization of the word platform in this slide, because we are having discussions with other third parties about utilizing our Trappsol Cyclo in other research programs independent of the company, frankly, where we may be looking at other disease indications utilizing our compound in combination with other existing and or new novel molecules as well. So it's quite exciting, and we think that 2022 under these auspices is going to be very exciting for our company. We've got a deep bench with our management team. Lisa, you will introduce herself shortly. Thank you, Lisa. Mike Lishak has joined us from Sanofi Genzyme. He runs our regulatory and has incredible relationships with EMA and FDA. And we've got incredible alliances with both the EMA and the FDA as we work with our clinical programs. Lori Gorski, also an alum of Sanofi, runs our global head of patient advocacy. And Jeff Tate manages our CMC. He's been with the company the longest, but he's an expert in manufacturing and as I said, manages all of our product development so that we have plenty of product, not only for our clinical programs, our EAP programs, our compassionate programs, as well as our research programs, most importantly, as we continue to build out our company. We've got a hands-on scientific advisory board, and I only want to make reference right now because of time to Caroline Hastings. Caroline Hastings was our lead PI for our US phase 1 clinical program when we stood it up. Caroline is the mother of the utilization of cyclodextrins for the treatment of Niemann-Pick type C in the world. She is the woman that originally got the ODD designation and assigned it to us, as well as being the first physician to dose the Hempel twins. And there's no HIPAA issues here because of the Hempels are all over the web and they're friends of the company. She dosed the Hempel twins originally with utilizing a cyclodextrin through an IV route of administration. I'm going to hand to Lisa to walk us through the NPC program and our Alzheimer's program. And then, as you know, Hartaj, we'd welcome any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Hartaj. I'm Lisa Gems. I'm the Chief Medical Officer. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I will give you a brief overview of our clinical portfolio, which I am leading together with the team. So the front runner in our clinical pipeline is our phase 3 pivotal registration trial in Niemann-Pick disease type C. It's an autosomal recessive genetic disorder. You can think of it as a neurovisceral degenerative disease that can be caused by either a defect in the NPC1 protein, which is in 95% of the cases, or in the residual 5% in the NPC2. So it's a monogenic disease. The epidemiology is quite uniform globally, with about 1 in 100,000 based on data available. The consequence of this autosomal recessive genetic disease is basically disrupted cholesterol and lipid metabolism, presenting both in the central nervous system as well as peripherally in major tissues and organs, resulting in the clinical signs and symptoms, which is neurological, hepatic cholestatic disease, cognitive defects, and also dementia, often referred to NPC as the dementia of the childhood. It's a tauopathy, and it has the consequences, sadly, being a fatal outcome in patients untreated, premature deaths, and as you can see here, very short median survival time in the very young patient segment, and also significantly shorter survival in the adolescent and adult patients. There are no approved pharmacological interventions in the US, and I will come to the trial that we are currently conducting. There's one approved therapy in Europe with miglustat, but that does not uniformly address the both central and peripheral effects, which is required in order to effectively treat this disease and address both the long-term consequences and also the potential for disease-modifying effects, which our trial is designed to do. Next slide, please. So just very brief, as Scott already alluded to, we consider Trappsol Cyclo, which is a proprietary formulation of cyclodextrin, as a platform technology. We administer Trappsol Cyclo intravenously, and the reason being that it provides the optimal both central and peripheral effects in this neurodegenerative disease, and anticipated also in other diseases that of which I will come to one a little later. In a normal setting, the NPC1 and the NPC2 proteins are instrumental in regulating in the late lysosome and also the lysosomal storage department, the trafficking of cholesterol and other lipids by synthesis, metabolism, and efflux, which occurs at a constant rate on a daily basis. Upon loss of function in the NPC1 or the NPC2 genes, you now have a vicious cycle with a disrupted synthesis and metabolism. There's no excretion or efflux from the cells of cholesterol or other lipid metabolites, leads to toxic accumulation, impacts not only on relative to key cells such as astrocytes, glial cells, and neurons, and basically that is what presents, followed along with inflammation that eventually will lead to both centrally and peripherally the observed clinical signs and symptoms. Why is Trappsol important in this setting? Trappsol is important because it, independent of NPC1 and NPC2, so it bypasses the defect, can go in and serve both as a cholesterol sink as well as a cholesterol shuttle. And it basically can bind the cholesterol and other lipids. It can clear the deposits that are there and restore the efflux of lipids, whether it's being from the central nervous system or from peripheral tissues and organs. What do we know about that? Is that indeed correct? And it is. We have seen, based on studies from Ramirez, Benilou, and others, very nice translation from preclinical model into the clinic. And what you see below here are data from our phase 1 trial in adult patients with Niemann-Pick disease type C. The left panel is the baseline, and the gray shaded area is basically indicative from liver histopathology of lipid accumulation. Following 7 intravenous doses, so 12 weeks of treatment in a 14-week study, you can now see a clear blue, the red dots are just to orient in the histopathology, clearance of cholesterol and other lipids at the cellular level. We have not chosen the best pictures for you. All patients from which we had histopathology had an effect with clearance from the liver tissue, as evidenced both with 1,500 and 2,500 milligram per kilogram per day, so indicative of a peripheral effect of Trappsol following a relatively short duration of treatment. Next slide, please. Just in essence, for the 2 completed clinical trials conducted, 101, 201 in adults, 201 in pediatric and adult patients, we have seen a very consistent observed safety and tolerability profile, irrespectively of age, disease severity, and duration of treatment, as well as doses. Importantly, the 101 study served as a proof of pharmacology. So we saw significant evidence of target engagement by biomarkers. We saw effect on disease-related biomarkers, and we saw preliminary effect on meaningful clinical endpoints, or I should say clinical functional readout. From a pharmacodynamic perspective, or PK/PD perspective, the drug was detectable in the cerebrospinal fluid within hours of initiation of the infusion, resulting in positive effect on cholesterol synthesis and metabolism, and cholesterol cleared from the peripheral tissues and cells, as I just showed you on the prior slide, but also evidenced by an increase in 24-hydroxysterol, which is the only cholesterol that is metabolized in the brain, and we saw also an effect on there, mimicking the effect from the preclinical experiments in vitro and in vivo. As we went into a 48-week study in both pediatric and adult patients, we saw clinical effects, clinical meaningful effects on clinical signs and symptoms such as cognitive function, improved motor skills, improved swallowing, among others, and on speech. And that was also accompanied by effects on biomarkers of target engagement and disease-related biomarkers. Assessment by the treating physician was that 8 out of 9 patients who completed the study had significant improvement in 1 or more efficacy endpoints, both by the 17 disease NPC severity scale, as well as the abbreviated, keeping in mind that this is a heterogeneous disease, so patients will come in with different severity score and different presentation of the disease. Altogether, based on the totality of the data from phase 1 and 2, we now have designed and entered into a phase 3 pivotal registration trial. It's a global trial. It is ongoing. It was endorsed by the FDA and the EMA, and we are treating both patients age 3 and older in the core study, which is the largest placebo-controlled trial, can go up to 96 weeks, followed by an open-label extension, planned interim analysis with efficacy at week 48. We are dosing a 2-to-1, so 62 on 2,000 mg per kg of Trappsol versus 31 on placebo. The endpoints are in line with the disease presentation, so the 4D NPC severity scale and the 5D in US and ex-US respectively. We are looking at ataxia, swallow, cognitive function, quality of life, and speech, among others, as well as assessing critical for this indication, which would be chronic treatment, the long-term safety and tolerability profile. We're also evaluating the potential of Trappsol in patients less than 3 years of age to assess in a small sub-study agreed with the EMA what impacts Trappsol can have when treatment is instituted in a very early point in time and potentially before neurological symptoms are presenting. Next slide, please.
Why don't I very quickly talk about this? So as we
I'll
know,
hand it over to you. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. the landscape has been littered with a couple of failures, which have been extremely disappointing to the patient population. Orphazyme received its CRL and only recently received bad news from the EMA that the likelihood of their drug arimoclomol was going to be approved. Abrobatidex, which was managed at its last point by Mallinckrodt, also received a CRL. What I want to point out most importantly here very quickly is, and Lisa's touched on it, is our drug given through the IV route of administration, we treat not only the systemic, but the neurological manifestations of the disease. And we believe we will become standard of care upon market registration of our drug. These other indications and their route of administration were frankly only going after the neurological manifestations of the disease, which again gives, from a patient viewpoint, we believe, and upon approval, will give us, as I said, standard of care to treat these patients. We are the only leading global clinical trial available in the marketplace today for the treatment of this disease, treating not only the systemic, but the neurological manifestations of the full body. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. If not, I'll move on to the next slide.
No, thank you, Scott.
AD. Go ahead, Lisa, please.
The other end of the spectrum of neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's disease, with very significant and emerging scientific and clinical evidence on the role of cholesterol metabolism or the disruption thereof contributing to Alzheimer's disease. And so also a progressive neurodegenerative disease, also with premature death and with similarities relative to the presentation of NPC. Very large patient population and expected to increase over time as the average age is increasing, could be as much as close to 14 million just in the US by 2050. Next slide, please. So this comes back to my point on NPC being a monogenic disease and Alzheimer's disease sharing similarities. Of course, cholesterol metabolism is not the sole contributor to the disease presentation and progression, but it plays a critical role in the same cellular effects as you will see, including, of course, also with amyloid and tau, as is also expressed or present in patients with NPC. So based on that, we believe the scientific and clinical rationale is well-founded, as also evidenced by a very fit-for-purpose phase 2 trial that we have designed and that we got the FDA study may proceed letter in December last year, and we are looking to advance the trial this year, as Scott alluded to. We are well supported by Cynthia Lemire, a prominent neuroscientist. She's our senior advisor on our Alzheimer's program and will be our advisor on other parallel indication expansions as well, well-established with her research lab at Harvard. And albeit an N of 1, a case study can certainly be indicative or provide a good perspective. The NPC data, as you have seen, is very supportive of what we can expect to see in the Alzheimer's disease patient population by the clearance of cholesterol and restoring the cellular metabolism. And we also have clinical data from a single patient in expanded access compassionate use that over a year and a half received Trappsol intravenously and basically had a stabilization in the disease presentation, with additional improvement in functional endpoints as evidenced not only by the family and patient, but importantly also by the treating physician. You can see here that over the course of the 18 months, the patient improved the mini-mental state evaluation performance, going from a baseline of 24 and increase or stabilizing. I may add the mini-mental state evaluation performance scale is a standardized and validated tool with objective assessment to be applied in this patient population for diagnosis and for evaluation of treatment benefits. Next slide, please. So I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, Lisa. I don't really want to talk about our market valuation because it's been decimated by the marketplace along with most of the other biotech stocks. So we just see ourselves as extremely undervalued and a great opportunity, and we'd be happy to take questions.
Yep, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is just I've been doing this a long time, and I have not seen what's happened in the last 13 months. I mean, there have been shorter periods where something like that has happened, but nothing quite this long and this sustained. So we just got to get through it. So just a couple of questions. Maybe just focus a little bit on NPC this time around. Question I have is you've got 93 patients. You're hoping to recruit 23 sites across the 9 countries. Any impacts of the ongoing geopolitical uncertainty, Scott or Lisa, on your recruitment strategy? How's that going? If you can give us an update there.
I'll take the first bite. The answer is we had looked at sites in Ukraine, to be very frank, which obviously that is on hold. But with respect to other clinical trial sites that we are either in or looking to explore to go in, we have seen no resistance and we're moving ahead as planned.
And then just have you recruited your first patient or dosed your first patient? Where are you right now with that?
The answer is because we do not give out a head count with respect to how many patients have been dosed, because we don't want to give that kind of guidance. The answer is yes, we have dosed patients, plural.
Yep. And then, Scott, I guess, the other question I would have is, and then maybe Lisa can also give some thoughts here, is, the NPC space, when we've looked at companies that are trying like a small molecule approach, that are trying to actually get the enzyme, into the parts of the cell that need it, to help with the disease. There are companies that are looking at it from, gene editing or gene therapy perspective. And then lastly, maybe companies, with mRNA looking at it. as you kind of survey, the NPC landscape, how do you see Trappsol Cyclo kind of playing out? Is it, do you see yourself as kind of like an acute therapy, or where do you see Trappsol Cyclo playing out, assuming, the phase 3 successful and it becomes commercial?
Scott, do you want me to address that
Please,
question?
Lisa. Yep, go ahead.
So I will be aspirational in my thinking and say that we, of course, hope that our data will provide evidence for us to be positioned as first-line therapy. Given the complexity of this disease and the aggressive disease progression that may occur in some patients, I also want to be realistic and note that it is plausible that combination therapy is required in patients. And as always, with these very complex ultra-rare diseases, could very well be a personalized medicine treatment paradigm where patients may benefit by different treatment modalities at different phases of their disease. But getting to the primary driver of the pathophysiology in this disease, we expect that Trappsol Cyclo will yield significant benefits with a very benign safety and tolerability profile. That is our, of course, aspiration. Data is king, so we will know as we advance our phase 3 program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, look, if we think about other therapeutic areas, could Trappsol Cyclo, if it's successful in phase 3 and gets approved, could it be a therapy that is given to patients initially to just rapidly clear cholesterol and maybe then prep them for other therapies, right?
Yes.
Where you could be introducing an enzyme or maybe try and do some kind of a gene modification.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I don't believe in a zero-sum game. I mean, in therapeutics, it's almost never happened unless you've got two approaches that are basically the same, right? And then it's just marketing essentially at that point.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. As you think about your readouts, have you given any guidance as to when you hope to have the recruitment done? When could you read out the trial? Have you given any sort of guidance there and any confidence intervals around that?
We haven't given out guidance on when we will complete enrollment, Hartaj. What we've done is we've structured it in a way where we have an interim analysis at 48 weeks, and if the study is powered and strong enough at that data readout, we hope to stop the study and go to market registration and put everyone on active drug. We've structured it this way based upon years of compassionate use data, as well as the outcome of the data from our phase 1, phase 2 trial. And the agencies, both the EMA and FDA, agreed with that plan. However, frankly, based upon the knowledge that we have now from the landscape of prior companies that have not been successful in getting their program done and not getting successful data readout and powered strong enough, the trial design is actually 96 weeks. So if we don't see enough strength in the data at 48 weeks, we'll continue for another 96 to gather that additional 48 weeks of data, which again, we anticipate and would hope would power it. But we've structured it this way, as I said, because the history of the utilization of the drug shows that at 48 weeks, we are hoping we show not only safety, first and foremost, but also efficacy at that point in time that will enable us to meet these endpoints to go for registration, Hartaj.
Yep, no, that makes sense. We just got a couple of questions on coming in through the internet portal, so I'll ask those. How do you expect to fund the Alzheimer's clinical trial, and how close are you to this goal?
Well, with our existing cash, we are very comfortable, as I'd said, to be able to say we are going to stand up the trial and we will recruit patients in the trial this year. I think that's probably as far as I can go on that question, Hartaj. But we will be up on clinicaltrials.gov this year, and we will have FPI in the Alzheimer's program this year off the current balance sheet.
Got it. Got it. Again, we don't cover you, Scott, but a question I would ask for companies that we cover would be that where are you in terms of working, for example, with the Alzheimer's patient organizations, various groups, the government? Are you able to access some kind of a non-dilutive funding that doesn't come from industry, but more comes from patient groups or from the government to help you with this goal?
Hartaj, that's a great question. We are very active in talking to several groups around an array of non-dilutive funding and partnering, as well as, and look, this is where Cindy Lemire, and by the way, I'll mention, we are going to be doing a fireside chat with Cindy and Lisa to talk specifically around the Alzheimer's program. I think the date is April 5th. Stay tuned, everyone. But utilizing Cindy's relationships, and just to give you color on her, she advises Biogen for that matter, Hartaj. So the answer to your question, and I hope you can see my smile, is yes, yes, and yes. We are reaching out to all of those groups. We're talking to key opinion leaders in the space. Cindy is helping us in a broad way of putting us in contact with PIs and other leading KOLs in the space who are looking at our program and will help us as we build it out.
Yep, got it. And then we've got a couple of questions that go back to NPC, and they specifically ask, have you enrolled your first patient in the phase 3 NPC clinical trial? When do you expect to have this study fully enrolled?
So I'll answer that. The first part I can answer. Yes, we've enrolled our first patients. We don't know when we'll be fully enrolled. We don't know. We have an estimate, but we don't know.
Yeah. And then another one, when can we get an update on the NPC enrollment? And this investor is asking, are you on track for full enrollment this summer?
Again, Hartaj, that's a question that would be giving guidance. And unfortunately, we really can't answer that question.
Okay, got it. And then, Scott and Lisa, one question I just have going back to Alzheimer's. When you think about the disease pathology, how well is it known the correlation between clearing cholesterol and restoring sort of, I guess, functionality leads to some clinical benefits in Alzheimer's disease? Like, how well is that known, and is that data fairly well recognized in the scientific community?
Lisa?
I think the scientific rationale is strong and sound and has been emerging significantly over the past 5 years. I may remind everyone that back in 1907, Dr. Alzheimer talked about lipid sacculars and already back then identified the role of disrupted cholesterol metabolism, of course not with the knowledge we have as of today. Based on preclinical models, histopathology from cadaveric donors with AD, it is very clear that cholesterol metabolism or disruption thereof plays a major role, not only in the aging brain, but also in an aging brain with neurodegenerative processes. And I think clearing or restoring that metabolism, which is critical to the brain, relying solely on the metabolism, synthesis and metabolism in the brain, and alleviating some of the qualitative defects that occurs in a central nervous system level, including the interface between lipotoxicity, so to speak, and inflammation, is going to be, I believe, of profound significance. Again, as we discussed, HATAS for NPC, similar for this disease, I expect that there will be a portfolio of treatment modality. The earlier patients with this disease are treated, I think the more potential exists as you look across the disease spectrum.
Yep, no, that makes sense, Lisa. One last question for me in this regard. So I imagine that this would be very difficult to do, but the the hypercholesterolemia agents have existed for a while. They're generic now. I imagine millions of patients have been treated with that. Is there any kind of meta, data or real world data that exists out there that, cholesterol lowering agents, when given that over time, maybe older populations seem to benefit, or there's a benefit on the AD side if you lower their cholesterol levels, taking these hypercholesteremia medications?
I think that's a great question and almost a session in and of itself, or when we, certainly something that we would also touch on, I expect, when we have the fire chat. I think the data with existing lipid-lowering agents are mixed. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that you are treating a patient population with multiple cardiometabolic comorbidities. And in essence, from my perspective, one thing is to have a peripheral effect in Alzheimer's disease, but the criticality is to also obtain a central effect. So one cannot exclude a degree of clinical benefit for sure, but I think it needs to be have clearly a penetrance in the brain to impact the central cholesterol metabolism, synthesis and metabolism and clearance.
No, I think that's fair, Lisa. I think that's very fair. As you said, a very diverse disease for those patients who are on those medicines. Well, again, always a pleasure. We're at the beyond our time. Lisa and Scott, thank you so very much. I always learn something new whenever I listen to your presentation. So thank you so very much, and we look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Thanks, Hartaj.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Scott. Stay safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.